for me, puts his hand up and admits it, seeing Harry and Meghan and the Prince and Princess of Wales together, mixing with the crowds, just as they did before Harry and Meghan's wedding, to me was a high. Am I being naive, over-optimistic?
I mean, it really was quite dramatic and quite surprising, wasn't it? And something we weren't all expecting, but really around here, along this long walk here, they came, the four of them, and I believe it's the first time the four of them have been together for 2 years, and they in fact arrived and set off in the same car driven by William. So to have the two brothers there, of course, very significant, because we know that there's been this rift in the family, but to have both their wives there, both Kate and Meghan as well, really was quite a move I think perhaps people weren't expecting. But I think in some ways, I think it was very important. I know there's been a lot of analysis of the body language and what does this mean, but and then people can kind of debate that aside. I guess what is important is a show of unity of the four of them together, I think, which was very much in keeping with King Charles's speech on Friday evening, in which he made a real point about extending his love to Harry and Meghan in their new adventure overseas. So I think that sentiment was very much sort of echoed in the four of them being out and about, sort of putting any differences aside on such an important occasion as they came and looked through all the flowers that have been laid here, reading some of the messages. And I have to say, I've just gone and had another look at some of them, and it really is quite remarkable. As for those of you watching can see, people have just been streaming along here for absolutely hours. It's just been growing and growing, and I wonder if in some ways, because the Queen died during the week, that actually now it's the weekend, this is really, particularly on a Sunday, I think, an opportunity for people to come, and that's what we're seeing, is all these families coming. And one thing that's really struck me is it's been really lovely hearing families sort of explaining a little bit about grief, about how we mark people. I overheard one mother sort of saying that the little boy said, you know, why is there a candle? And she said, well, that's what we do when we remember somebody. And I think there's been something actually really lovely there. There was a slightly different sentiment to when Princess Diana died, and we saw crowds of people sort of sobbing in the streets as they laid flowers. This is a slightly different situation. Of course, she was 96 years old, and of course it's a different circumstance, but it's of course sombre, but it is something that people can come together in, reflect. And Windsor, of course, being very much the right place for people to do that, because this was her home. And as you were just saying there, that she will in fact be laid to rest here at King George's Chapel at Windsor Castle.
We're just showing some pictures there of the Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales and Harry and Meghan there from yesterday evening. And it's also a reminder of the fact that this is a family grieving the loss, in their case, of a grandmother, in the King and the Princess Royal's case, a mother, obviously. And one thing that struck me very, very strongly is in an awful lot of the emails that we've had at GBViews and on social media, the number of people who say, as it were, been there and done it. I remember when my mother died. I remember when my elderly sister died, or whatever. That this family, if it is to be durable, as we've been saying here in the studio, it does need to be able to relate to people, and people are relating very strongly to this sense of loss, albeit of a woman who was 96 years of age.
Yes, absolutely. I think there is something incredibly universal about funerals, and I think that's one of the ways in which this has really touched so many people, not just in the United Kingdom, but across the world. And therefore, I think particularly, I think also people know that sometimes when there are funerals, they're often, I'm sure we've all had times where you come together as families, and there's perhaps a few slightly tricky family dynamics at any family occasion, whether they're weddings or funerals. But it is also an opportunity to put any differences aside and look at the bigger picture, particularly, as you're saying there, if we want longevity of the monarchy. And therefore, I wasn't actually surprised when we heard that comment from King Charles in his address on Friday night, because I think it's important on an emotional level, on a personal level, but it's also important on a much wider scale in terms of the monarchy, showing strength in the monarchy, showing strength in the royal family, which of course has had, you know, a relatively, I suppose, turbulent time maybe over the last year. And of course, you know, with Harry and Meghan having gone to the US, there's of course been some issues there. But I think to have that show of unity of the four of them coming together, and presumably will continue that show of unity at the funeral, will be immensely powerful, not just for them as a family in a way that's very personal, which we can all relate to, but for about the British monarchy as an institution.
Final point, and we're here live television for folk kind enough to be listening to us on radio. I will explain what I want you to give me your final comment upon, Alice. And if you can still hear me, just take half a step to your left now and just look at that crowd behind you, all the way from where Alice is, right winding up that hill. Ordinary folk in Windsor Great Park come to the great palace of Windsor, Windsor Castle, to spend part of their Sunday, to share their thoughts, their reflections, families, all ages. That is a truly remarkable image, Alice.
It really is, and I know this is something that has been said numerous times over the last few days, is that this is a moment in history, and I certainly feel that as a journalist, but I think people also feel that as bystanders, as people who've come, that this is something that is an immensely unique event. But I think particularly, I guess now with the sun is coming up, there is something quite remarkable on this Sunday of families all coming. And one thing that really struck me was I asked, there's so many sunflowers here, and I was expecting some lilies. Obviously that's something we associate with death, but I kept seeing so many sunflowers, and I went and asked a few people, and I said, do you mind me asking what's the significance of sunflowers? And they said it's because the Queen was such a ray of sunshine to us. And I think even sort of saying this gives me little chills a little bit, because the sun is just coming up now, families coming with these beautiful flowers to put them down with wonderful heartfelt messages, but also messages with some humour as well. I mean, I've seen so many lovely little Paddington bears that have been put by children, and it is something that is incredibly remarkable to witness.